Yes, I do have schmutz on my face. It was the beginning of Lent today. We're both cradle Catholics. I had to go to a morning mass. He's going to the evening one. Hello, humans of the internet. I need a better introduction. My name is Taylor. If you don't already know, I am the artistic director and founder of Opera Cecilia, well, co-founder alongside my lovely husband.
Yours truly, T, host of Tenor Vision.
Executive producer of OC. Today, we wanted to do an extra special video that is probably highly anticipated since we've been doing so many Encanto ones. We had to do the one that was like a certified bop, like an actual certified bop on the Billboard Hot 100. We don't talk about Bruno. This little guy down here is one of our rescue babies. His name is Bugs Bunsy. That's his full name, but we affectionately call him Buns. He's our sweetie that is going to be hanging out with us for our video today. So I hope you enjoy our little bun bun.
We don't talk about Bruno, no, no, no. We don't talk about Bruno. But it was my wedding day. It was our wedding day. We were getting ready and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. No clouds allowed in the sky. Bruno walks in with a mischievous grin. Thunder. You're telling this story or am I? I'm sorry, maybe that go wrong.
I want to appreciate Pepa for a while because she is so expressive. I noticed a lyric thing that I want your opinion on. She sings, "It was my wedding day." It was my, right? Mm-hmm. She said my, which is very indicative of like bride culture and like, you know, it's like my wedding until there's actually like a partner involved. When she goes to start talking about Bruno, she's got this perception that Bruno has like this mischievous grin and he's going to be this agent of chaos in her life.
Yeah, it was like the anticipation of that character and who Bruno was happening before even Bruno opened his mouth. Yes. About what he was going to say. And so there was an assumption going into that communication that probably colored the way that she interpreted what he was saying. I also just want to give mad props. I think Felix is the world's most supportive husband.
Absolutely. I love Felix. There's so many like microtransactions, micro jokes in the whole... The movie is so chock full of micro jokes. Felix adds such a richness to the whole family madrigal, and he's like the quintessential best partner that you would want your child to marry, in my opinion.
I think what's also awesome about Felix and what I've noticed Disney trying to very intentionally do is to kind of stray away from that like traditional toxic masculinity dynamic when a marriage is portrayed between characters on screen, and more creating characters that are like just genuinely like really, really supportive husbands that support their wife's autonomy, that allow their wife to be completely who she is, even for her faults, because none of these female characters are perfect, you know? But he also is graciously coming into a family that is very complex. There's a lot going on there.
A lot of layers.
And a lot of baggage. And that's normally, we know from experience, having married into each other's families, that there's no family that is without their baggage. And so that's a part of the kind of in-law dynamic that he has so graciously accepted. He's very patient with her when she gets feisty, and she tends to be the one whose faults are more worn on her sleeve than his. And I think you have to be an especially gracious spouse when you have a family member or when you have a partner that is dealing with some sort of like mental health issue. I think Pepa's powers are kind of indicative of some of the mental health issues she might be dealing with. Anxiousness being a very prevalent thing. As somebody who lives with anxiety themselves, i.e. me, and being in our marriage and you having to be very patient with aspects of that, I see a little bit of myself in Pepa's character too, because Pepa is struggling to not feel the storm cloud over the top of her all the time, or to not feel like chaos is constantly happening, or being paranoid that chaos is going to happen. And so as a result of that, she can come across as very like erratic and super, super emotional and unstable. I don't think anybody would disagree with me in saying that her character does not necessarily like scream stability. And I can relate to a certain extent because I've had days where I've felt like Pepa, but she has a husband that is her counter. He is a very calming presence, and he's a little bit more go with the flow. And he doesn't really care that a hurricane happened.
He handles it so well.
I mean, he married a bit of a hurricane. So, like, he was just like, this is what, it's beautiful anyway because it's with you, and that's all that matters.
I'm sorry, maybe that go wrong. Bruno says it looks like rain.
Why did he tell us?
In doing so, he floods my brain.
I will like the umbrella.
Married in a hurricane.
What a joy to stay, but anyway,
We don't talk about Bruno, no, no, no. We don't talk about Bruno.
What I love about that too is the fact that like he's like, what a joyous day, but anyway. He doesn't talk about Bruno because he doesn't want to talk about Bruno. I think he avoids the subject of Bruno because it makes his wife upset.
When he was bringing her down from the storm after her saying, just tell the story, you know, if you're gonna keep on interjecting, he calms her down in such a loving way that Pepa can't help but have a smile on her face. And you see that in other scenes too, like when Mirabel butts her out of the way to sit next to Luisa, you see the little storm cloud over her head, and then Felix like holds her hand and she turns to him and just like it's so loving.
It's her safe space to be with him. And that's so important for a spouse that is dealing with mental health issues or concerns, especially if they happen to be a particularly anxious spouse. Obviously, of course, there's Latin American, Colombian heavy influences in everything. You get kind of like tango-like elements, especially in this beginning part. But what I love is how expressive and character-driven the voices are in this piece. Every single voice was so carefully chosen and so carefully cast to be extremely expressive in its own right. You see that a lot in Pepa because Pepa has a little bit of a higher voice, but then when she goes down into the no, 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 she gets into like this really deep kind of foreboding richness. And so her vocal tones and her colors shift just as erratically as her personality can shift. And then Felix has a pretty steady vocal range throughout the whole entire piece, and he only really fluctuates in tone to either placate his wife, but for the most part his range stays in kind of like a nice, calming, comfortable place.
In short, it's very quintessentially like musical theater-y combined with voice acting that is necessary for an animated feature.
It's really, really cool how this show doesn't just reflect typical Disney movie traits, it shows stage musical traits too. And I heard that there's some rumors that this might become a Broadway musical in the future, and I am so rooting for that to happen.
Hey, grew to live in fear, Bruno stuttering or stumbling. I can always hear him sort of muttering and mumbling. I associate him with the sound of falling sand. It's a heavy lift with a gift so humbling. Always let the brother in the family fumbling, grappling with prophecies they couldn't understand. Do you understand?
Listen for the sound design in this.
It's
you
so
will
cool.
hear there's an empty echo going on that you can clearly hear the stomping, and it's really fascinating to hear those textures.
Yeah, and the textures also kind of led us into Dolores' world. I don't think it's any coincidence that all of a sudden we're more in tune at this point in the song to the background noise, to the things that are happening that aren't immediately in the song, and the orchestration of the song kind of takes a back burner a little bit in this moment. And it's because Dolores hears all these things all the time. Like, imagine having the gift that she has. She's known about Bruno this entire time. She knows that he's in the walls. She hears him constantly, and she's always somehow, even though she has a hard time keeping secrets in other parts of the show, somehow she's kind of just kept this to herself, probably for the sake of peace in the family.
It's actually a plot hole that she didn't tell anyone that Bruno was around, but I have a theory that when she was younger, she confronted him or ran into him, and he asked her not to say anything and maybe he like scared her with the prophecy or something. I'm not entirely sure. But for some reason, she agreed to not sell him out and say, you know, Bruno's still here.
Also, I feel like that noise. Didn't you read a little thing about the significance of that noise?
I did read that it's like a cultural thing. You know how in different languages there are phrases that like mean something else, like out of left field in English?
Yeah.
Out of left field is probably more of an American thing rather than like an English thing.
Yeah.
Apparently in Colombian culture, that sound is made by people when they overhear something that they shouldn't have heard.
Yeah, that like high-pitched sort of thing that happens at the end of a lot of Dolores's moments in the show. I have a little bit of a theory as well that maybe Dolores, because she hears everything all the time, knew that Bruno's, spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't already seen the movie, knew that Bruno only was leaving the family and hiding in the walls to protect Mirabel. Maybe she had kind of that same thing in mind. She was like, Mirabel's also gonna get ousted from the family and she's so young and she doesn't deserve that if I say something. So maybe for the sake of protecting Mirabel, she also decided not to say anything about Bruno, because bringing Bruno back into the picture might cause problems for Mirabel too.
I want to actually listen to the lyrics again. I'm wondering if Dolores is subtly trying to get Mirabel to understand that like Bruno is here, and if you haven't run across any of the other breakdown videos, you can see him in the background of their singing.
Hey, grew to live in fear, Bruno stuttering or stumbling. I can always hear him sort of muttering and mumbling. I associate him with the sound of falling sand. It's a heavy lift with the grip so humbling. Always left up a lie in the family fumbling. Grappling with prophecies they couldn't understand. Do you understand?
Grappling with prophecies they couldn't understand. Do you understand? And the way she's looking at her is like, listen to what I'm telling you, you know?
And also, if we're going with the character trait that it's hard for Dolores to keep a secret, imagine carrying this with you for your entire existence, basically.
Or half her life,
you know,
least.
or at least half her life. So, also, this is the perfect shot that we still shotted right here of Bruno in the background. Because you can see him with his eyes like peering at them.
He's dancing.
And he's dancing. So there's a lot of like subtleties that happen in this particular scene. I also love the fact that the color scheme changes to like golds and more of a color scheme that fits with Dolores's aesthetic and with what she's talking about, like falling sand and stuff. It has sand references in the color scheme too, versus hurricane and storm references, obviously, in the gray color palette that we were getting with Pepa and Felix. So all of the color schemes are highlighting the problems that Bruno may have caused for the characters.
7-foot frame, rats along his back. When he calls your name, it all fades to black. Yeah, he sees your dreams and feasts on your screams. We don't talk about Bruno, no, no, no. We don't talk about Bruno.
That's one of the most earwormy hooks that you will hear.
Every single part of this piece is an earworm in its own way, which is why it's become such a big hit. There's at least one part of the song that like almost everyone has stuck in their heads. He is shape-shifting into Bruno, but it just makes me question whether or not his powers and the exact form that he shapeshifts into are indicative of how he thinks of people too. Bruno doesn't have, when you meet him, he has a much friendlier face and he looks like that, but he doesn't have those like green glowing eyes and things like that. So what if Camilo's perceptions of people also colors the way that he looks when he shapeshifts into them? Gives an extra layer or dimension to Camilo's powers that are not fleshed out as much in the show. It's crazy how every section of this piece is so distinct, but they all blend together so well.
He told me my fish would die the next day. No, no.
I cracked up so hard when you made comments on this for the first time.
Okay, y'all, we have to pay attention to what's going on in that fishbowl, because there ain't nothing there besides the fish, okay? I'm not the expert, but I'm pretty sure they need like rocks and plants in there, otherwise they die.
I think Bruno was just kind of saying the inevitable at that point. Because this fish ain't got no stimulation in that bowl.
Oh no! He told me I'd grow a gut, and just like he said that all my hair would disappear. Now look at my hair.
Your fate is sealed when your prophecy is read.
I Love those harmonies.
They're fantastic.
They're so great.
So harmonies are really, really fascinating to me when the harmonic structure is what, for lack of better terms, people refer to as crunchy. And when they kind of shift into like minor tonalities every once in a while, that is so pleasing to the human ears. Like, we all love that.
The more the harmonies take your ear by surprise, the more likely I think that our brain is to pay attention.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big reason why a lot of this song is so very catchy, because there's unexpected turns everywhere.
The use of air in airflow in the characters' voices is really indicative of the characters themselves. So Camilo used a much fuller vocal tone because he was trying to convey the sense of like dread and threatening aggression, basically, of Bruno, and airiness, or letting excess breath escape through the vocal tone, which you can do if it's a stylistic choice and not a tick. You have to have an undertone of good vocal support, but you can totally do those things. Is in Dolores's voice. Because you hear that Dolores can sing in full voice later in this piece. You'll hear that. But for this first solo that she had, she was in these hushed tones because she wanted to convey the secrecy of the situation.
Notice how very Hamilton it is.
Very
the
Hamilton.
staging. I want to call it a staging because it's very reminiscent of a stage production.
Your faith is sealed when your prophecy is read. He told
There it
me
is.
that the life of my dreams would be promised and someday be mine.
Meryl's face.
Told me that my power would grow like the grapes that thrive on the vine.
Oye, Mariano's on his
He
way.
told me
The wedding march there.
There's like a wedding march. That's the only time that Abuela really comes in that moment, and it's because she is trying to control and corral the situation. She only really sings when she's expressing vulnerability. That doesn't come till the end of the movie, or when she's trying to control or corral the family. You hear airiness in Isabella's tone because she's supposed to be literally the wind flowing through her hair, dreamy. So excess air in the tone can also convey a dreamy quality to a performer too.
Mariano's on his
he
way.
told me that the man of my dreams would be just out of reach, betrothed to another. It's like I hear him. Hey sis, I want not a sound out of you. I can hear him now. Bruno. Yeah, about that Bruno. I really need to know about Bruno. Give me the truth and the whole truth, Bruno.
Isabella, your boyfriend's here.
Time for
What a little soul.
do my way down the line.
He's back when he comes to
Promise and sound in the sky.
bells are loud in the
He
sky.
told me that my power was grown. You're telling this story or mine? Somebody else on his way.
What did you tell us?
Promise and sound in the night.
When I put the umbrella. He's here. Don't talk about Bruno.
Why did I talk about Bruno?
Not a word about Bruno.
Never should have brought up Bruno.
The layering that's happening is so simple but complex.
It really is.
Orally, it's very complex and it's got a lot of moving parts, and our brain is just like, but it's in a very fascinating way.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking about the other day is that this is very structured like a musical, like an Act 1 finale,
Oh yeah,
Where-
this would totally be the Act 1 finale of the
where
musical.
themes that have been introduced before come back and seamlessly overlap each other.
Oh my gosh, please forgive me, like, musical theater community, if I completely butcher this term. But there's, like, some sort of term called, like, a 12 o'clock number. Or something like
11
that.
o'clock?
11 o'clock number, some number, I don't even know. Usually about halfway through a musical, either for the Act 1 finale or for, like, one of the first numbers after into Act 2, there's this, like, 11 o'clock number that is, like, really, really big and kind of, like, puts if the audience member was starting to fall asleep before, they're definitely not asleep now. And that's definitely, I feel like, what We Don't Talk About Bruno serves as. At this point, we're getting ready to, like, have that dinner, Mariano is, you know, gonna propose to Isabella, and it's all of that stuff. And then we get this little side from Dolores who
is like the most beautifully animated character.
She's gorgeous. Oh my gosh, everyone has a crush on Dolores.
I'm getting heavy Eliza and Angelica vibes from Dolores.
Yeah, where she feels like she kind of just has to
just
take
out
a
of
back
reach
burner,
yeah.
And she can't. Yeah, it is very similar to that relationship dynamic actually in Hamilton, and I think that it's true that Angelica Schuyler actually had like an entire song, Satisfied, where she fleshes that out, and she's like, I made a stupid choice by not saying something. That was dumb. Because now I'm going to live my whole life thinking this, and it could mess up my relationship with my sister, or like maybe they weren't actually meant to, like I didn't say something and that's on me. And she basically says that in Satisfied. Dolores is also having kind of this moment where she's like reflecting a little bit in the song, but she's sort of more in that like longing, I don't feel like I could have done anything about it phase, because Abuela has such a strong hold on how things are supposed to go. And Dolores's role in the family is not to be the beacon of hope or the perfect child. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting dynamic. I also think it's interesting how we see all of these like flowers that are coming down from the upper balcony when Dolores is singing about her stuff, and the flowers go back down to Isabella, and then Isabella is like really ornery with Mirabel. And so it just kind of shows the obliviousness that sometimes these female characters in the family have toward each other. Like, Isabella doesn't realize that none of this is Mirabel's fault. She blames it all on Mirabel for things being disordered. And then she's completely oblivious to how Dolores feels. And there isn't really an explanation of whether or not Isabella and Dolores even have that close of a relationship. Maybe they don't. Maybe Dolores kept her distance because she was having a hard time with Mariano not being heard.
Okay, the camera died on us, so here's our backup.
All right, we're gonna finish out this video. There's a lot of different relationship dynamics between the female characters that are interesting to flesh out, and every single one of their vocal tones, once again, are so indicative of their character. Also, Camilo is the world's biggest troll. That's a role in the family.
If you like what we have to say about this, let us know in the comments. Did we miss anything? Type it out. Press like so this video can show up on more people's feeds, help our company and our channel grow.
Subscribe, hit the notification bell, do all of the awesome things that get this channel out there in the YouTube algorithm. We appreciate it so much, and we're so thankful for all the support that we've gotten so far. Keep watching out for more from Tenor Vision and the artistic director, and a reaction and analysis series coming